Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Categorically Romance podcast. My name is Bree, and I am so excited for today's episode. I, in parentheses, finally have author Elle Douglas joining me. Elle, thank you for joining us here on the podcast. We're so happy to have you. Can you share a little bit with a little bit about yourself with us?
Yes. Okay. So first off, I just have to say, Bree, that I'm so happy to be here. I think most aspiring writers have that moment in mind that like keeps them slogging through the slush piles and rejection letters, like signing their first contract or like getting to hold the physical copy of their book in their hands. But for me, I always thought I'll know I made it when I'm on a guest on the Categorically Romance podcast. And honestly, like I listened to every episode. I learned a ton and I was like really inspired by the writers and hearing about their journeys. So it's a
Oh,
thrill to be here.
wow. Thank
Thank you.
you.
So a bit about me. So I write small town contemporary romance, mostly set in Canada. I write for Harlequin Special Edition and now also for Thule Publishing, which I'm really excited about. I'm just finishing up my 15th year in teaching. I spent the first chunk teaching high school English and social sciences, and now I work as a guidance and university counselor for like a truly unbelievable group of grade 11 and 12 game changers who routinely make me wonder what the heck I was doing with my time as a high school student. Um, yeah, and I live in Toronto with my wife and our cat Lucy, and I'm the proud auntie to 5 nieces and nephews who call themselves the Sleepover Squad and who I take great joy in spoiling.
What made you want to switch from actual teaching to like the guidance counselor role?
I think with guidance counseling, what's really nice is you still get to work with young people. And so a lot of the work I do is one on one. I loved helping students improve their writing, but there was something that was sort of like, it really was really crushing, when a kid had a short story they wrote and maybe it wasn't, so terrific and you had to give a grade to that essay. And now I work with students on their admissions essays. And so it's a chance to be more of like a cheerleader, like, let's get this all polished up and ready to go and not have to assign a grade to it or anything like that. And so I really like that part of it. And honestly, if I never had to mark another Macbeth essay in my life, I'm be a truly happy woman. So yeah, it's great. I do love working in high schools, and so this new role just feels like a really good fit.
I feel like this is I can be so America minded because that's all that I see and hear about. And like being a teacher here, I mean, if you get on TikTok, like I feel like every other video is a teacher trying to explain to the world like how far behind the kids are. Does that feel the same up there?
Um, it depends. I mean, I work at a very academically focused school. It's an independent school, so it's very well resourced. So our students are very fortunate in that regard. My sisters both work in the public system, and my brother-in-law, we like to call it like the family business, is teaching.
Wow.
And so, yeah, I mean, I do hear stories, about their experiences, and it can be a little bit different. I think the pandemic obviously wasn't helpful for young people in education and adjusting, socially and learning all these things that were benchmarks. So I would say, yeah, across the board, like in the last few years, I've seen some gaps, and so hopefully things are starting to improve.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I have some get to know you questions. So, whatever comes to mind. The first one is share with us two of your favorite things. They can be totally random, current obsessions, lifelong obsessions, whatever.
Okay, so I'd say like a current obsession. I've just like completely burned through the most recent season of Hacks, which I just love. I think is a terrific story. There's like the aging comedian Deborah Vance who hires the young protege, and all the tension between their different outlooks on life, but this like friendship that blossoms between them. So I just think it's really really funny and poignant. Um, and I guess like an overall obsession in my life would be food. So that's like cooking it, eating it, taking pictures of it. And actually have a free online read coming out later this month on the Harlequin website called Her Chef's Kiss, which is one of the 4 stories they're releasing in celebration of Pride Month. And so in that story, I got to really indulge in my love of food in writing.
Yeah. Okay. So the next question was about food because I like on your having read your website, I know you're like you are an aspiring chef first. I was like, me too, girl, but I'm also super picky. So what is one of your favorite comfort or like your go-to comfort foods to make? Like, what do you enjoy making?
Yeah, like I think, well, it's certainly living in Canada. I mean, one of the very few perks of winter and cold weather is comfort food for sure. And one of the things that I have sort of, I wouldn't say perfected, but it's like a go-to over the years has been braised short ribs. So I
Mm.
make them in like my Le Creuset. It's a perfect winter comfort food, pretty easy to make, and they're like melt in your mouth, tender, and they always turn out. So it's like, yeah, that would be the number one.
What do you like to make with them?
Okay, so that could be maybe like roast potatoes.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, something like equally comfort food. And then,
Do you
you
feel like
feel,
food is a love language?
oh, absolutely,
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Yes, and I that's one thing. Like, I also just find to be a real like a stress buster. So I cook every night. So I'm the cook in the house, and then my partner's the cleaner. And so after work, it's great because it's something to do that's physical, sort of like after sitting in front of a computer all day, it's standing, it's moving, and like some space to either daydream and think about plots or even just to like watch a show and tune out a little bit. So yeah, it's a love language. And I just think in my life, it's like a really great place to go that's not doesn't feel like work.
Well, I also read that you love 90s alternative music. So, who's one of your favorites to listen to?
And I think I'm not sure exactly how old you are, but I feel like having listened to some of your comments in the past, we are like a little bit close generationally.
Mhm.
But yeah, I grew up, I was like really into like Smashing Pumpkins and Weezer, Radiohead, Garbage, Blur, all of these bands. But if I had to pick one, I would go with a band called Sloan. I was like such a super fan in grade school. And that was actually the first concert that I ever went to in grade 7. It was at Varsity Arena in Toronto with my dad. And I think I wore my Pickering Softball Association warm-up suit, so dorky and like complete opposite of these amazing outfits that grade 7s are wearing to concerts these days. But yeah, I was like a real Sloan super fan.
Oh, that I don't know what it is. I feel like the 80s has such memorable music. Like my mom was such an 80s like teenage girl and I don't I just I still love like growing up in the 90s they would play 80s music especially like during the summer, like during lunch and so you kind of grow up with that music and it's just kind of timeless. It has just this distinct sound that when it first comes on, you know this is probably an 80s song. And then the 90s, especially like 90s grunge and the alternative music, like it's just so timeless. Like I will be in the car, like I love one of my all-time favorite songs is Jumper by Third Eye Blind. And my kids are like,
Oh
why are you crying? And I'm like, you don't understand
yeah.
how
They don't
important
get
this song is. Like, they don't make
it.
it like this anymore.
Oh, it's so true. And like, I mean, my Spotify algorithm would tell a story of all of those songs. So yeah, Third Eye
Yeah.
Blind's amazing. Yeah.
Well, if you came with a warning label, what would it say?
I would, I think it would say, I think it would say road rager. And I will say I'm actually a very, very safe driver. But when I see other people driving recklessly, the words that come out of my mouth are truly obscene. And I get like I got a little passive aggressive too. So like if someone is tailing me, I might just slow down a little just to stick it to them. Um, but honestly, like I'd say I'm a pretty even keel person in every area of my life, pretty much, other than sometimes in the car. And so I say like bring on the driverless cars.
Yeah, yeah. Same. I play it pretty safe. I don't wanna get stopped by the police. I know I have a heavy foot, so I'm, like, constantly checking, "Are you speeding?" But if people could hear the things that I say.
Oh, I same, same.
Um, who would you say is one of your most read authors? It could be any genre.
Okay, well, nonfiction, I know that you and I both have Ruth Reichel in common. She's
Yes.
amazing. But for fiction, I think I've read everything that Ellen Hilderbrand has published. I just love the interpersonal drama. I love how she writes about food. And actually, I just got my personalized special edition of Swan Song in the mail yesterday. So I have to wait until my very first official day of summer vacation to crack it open. And you'll love this. As you know, someone who I know is a super fan of certain things. I got an email a few weeks ago from her mailing list, and it was advertising this like this perfect weekend experience. And so she hosts these weekends on Nantucket where her readers all congregate and they tour around to all the places where the stories are set. And then there's like a dinner with Ellen, and then you go dancing at the chicken box. Like it's very Ellen Hildebrand, like super fan weekend. And I saw it and I realized that it aligned with my school break. And I didn't really even think twice. I just clicked and I bought a ticket.
You
And then
have to.
I know. And I was like, oh my gosh, now I have to actually like get down there and like find myself a way to get to Nantucket. But anyway, I think it's going to be great. I'm excited.
What do you love about her books? I bought, I've really wanted to get into her stuff, and I bought the Five-Star Weekend last summer, and I just got the audiobook in from the library this
Mhm.
week. Because I don't know, when I hear names and I know people love somebody so much, I'm like, "I wanna know what they love about her." So this will be my first, but, like, what do you love about her books so much?
It's just, I mean, they're funny. She, I think, is I respect her as a writer. So she went to Johns Hopkins, I think, for creative writing, and then she did the Iowa Writers Workshop. And so she's like a great writer, and also, you know, it's funny. There's comedy. There are tear jerking scenes, and I do like books that go from, you know, multi character points of view. So every chapter we get, you know, a sort of different person, different take on what's going on the island. And it's just like this cool different place. I think that there are very few places in the world like Nantucket. I'm interested in seeing it for myself, but she pokes fun at it and some of the like ridiculous stuff that goes on and the wealth, and so there's, I think there's just, I mean, it's just like a great beach read experience. So
Yeah.
I think you'll like it.
I have to also ask for our girl Ruth, are you gonna read the Paris novel?
Oh, I'm almost done.
You okay,
It
I just
is
got that
like,
in there from the library too.
oh,
Is
that
it
is like
good?
so food, like it's so indulgent and like it's just, yeah, I mean, and it's like Paris, and so the setting is so evocative and the story is really interesting. There's sort of this like art history piece. Yeah, so I've been really enjoying that one too. And I like her nonfiction. Like I love hearing the behind the scenes of the restaurant world and her, you know, being like a food critic and getting recognized and getting treated a certain way, and then going in disguise, right? And going to all these places in disguise so that she would understand what it was like to be a quote unquote regular person going and having an experience at these restaurants.
Yeah, I remember oh gosh, it's the book with the it's a paperback blue
Garlic and
cover.
sapphires.
Yes, and she
Yes.
talked about, like, in disguise, dressing up as, like, a mom from the Midwest and how they, like, completely ignored her, and then I think
Yes.
she went and changed clothes and was, like, herself, and she, like, immediately got in, was given a good seat, and she was just, like, just pointing out the difference in treatment. I was like, "You don't think about that."
100%. And what was like really interesting too is that she published two reviews side by side, and so it was the review as her, as someone who, I think they moved the King of Spain to another table or something
Yes.
so
Yep.
she could have the best table, and then the other review was from the point of view of that woman, and
Yeah.
so it was just like this stark contrast, and I think that changed the game for restaurants because they realized, oh yeah, no, these people are going to come in and we might not always know who who the reviewers are. And of course, they absolutely should be treating everyone as prized guests, but that doesn't happen. And so I think that woke the restaurant industry up.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I love that book.
Shout out to our girl Ruth if she ever hears this. Well, we love hearing romance origin stories. So, can you tell us how you became a romance reader?
Yeah, so I think like most of the authors who have been on the show, I grew up and still continue to be a really voracious reader. Even as a kid, before getting out of bed in the morning, I would reach for whatever book was on my side table and read a few chapters. And reading and writing were always very valued in my family. So my grandpa, my mom's dad, was a magazine editor, and my dad wrote when I was a kid and continues to write plays for young people. And so, yeah, we're a really big reading family, and some of us are writers too. So I read everything. So Babysitter's Club to Sweet Valley to Goosebumps and Fear Street. But I think my first foray into romance was when I picked up one of my mom's Judith Krantz books. And I forget the title. I remember it having a gold cover. Maybe it was called Lovers. But in any event, I was very interested in some of the scenes in that book, which were probably very inappropriate for someone my age. And so what resulted was like a bit of a cold war with my mom. And so the book would disappear from wherever I hid it in my room, and I'd find it in her room and steal it back again. And then back and forth it went, and it was never spoken of. But yeah, that would probably be my first romance novel that I experienced. And then, yeah, and then I got into that, and never really saw myself writing romance, but it was certainly, yeah, it was something that I did enjoy reading growing up.
Yeah, and so I read that. I mean, you've done a lot of school, Elle, but like you're a graduate of a creative writing program. Like that's one of the things that you've done. Had you always, I mean, you've been around writers all your life. So how did you get bit by the writing bug? Just being around like your grandpa, who I love the fact that he's a magazine editor, your dad, like was it just like so normal for you or did you kind of gradually fall into it?
I think both. I think it was normal, and I think about in grade school. I think one of the big projects I remember working on was this elaborate like choose your own adventure story for a school project. And then when I was in high school, my favorite class was my grade 12 creative writing class, and that class was actually taught by a man named Paul Frawley, who was also my guidance counselor. And so safe to say, he had an influence on my life. So shout out to Mr. Frawley. So then after high school, I ended up studying radio and television. And so when I was in the second year of my program, I applied to this grant to for money to produce a short film that I wrote the script for. So that was a kids short film called Lemonade Standoff. And what was cool is that you got this money, and then you got to produce and direct the short film, and then it was aired on YTV, which is like a kids television channel here in Canada. So that I did a little bit of writing, in that sort of sphere. And then when I graduated, I got a job working for Chorus Entertainment, and that was in the creative department at another station, which was called W Network or Women's Network. And there I worked alongside a team involved in making a variety of television shows. And those were anything from like a home reno show, like Love It or List It, to makeover shows. And we also aired a lot of like Hallmark type movies as well. And so when I was there, I also worked on a team that launched Cosmo TV in Canada. So my exposure to storytelling that's geared predominantly towards women started at that time. But I still had a teaching bug. Like I loved my job. It was a lot of fun. It was creative. It was dynamic. There were lots of fun parties. But like I said, I always had this pull towards teaching. And so I went back to school and ended up falling in love, and I left television. Um, and so when I was teaching, as I mentioned, I taught creative writing. And so my principal sent me back to school So I did like continuing ed courses at the University of Toronto in their creative writing program. And what was really fun about that program is they had like really specific courses. So I studied everything from mystery writing to memoir and YA. And at that point, the idea of writing romance again had never really crossed my mind. I knew I eventually wanted to be published. I didn't know how and in what capacity, but yeah, that kind of came out of that program.
I guess I growing up, I didn't know that there was, like, creative writing programs, so I'm always when I see like, I've had a few authors that are like, they've done it, and I'm like, "I did not know that was a thing," but that is really cool. That's really cool, and especially having the background like yours where you're around it so much, but just the way that life happens, I think, it's cool to find out that it came to you. It was kind of a timing thing, like, it came to you when it was supposed to come to you kinda thing.
For sure. Yeah, and I truly did enjoy it. It's nice to have something outside of work that is a project or like I was, I'm at school all day working, but it's different when you're a student again too. So
Mhm.
I really enjoyed that.
Well, I love how on your website, you have that you're an author of small town, big heart romance. When you look at media you've consumed, I'm always like, what led to that? So, media you consume, whether it's books, movies, television, do you think there are small town romances or just small towns, whatever, that have imprinted on you and gradually helped shape the types of romance that you enjoy writing now?
Oh yeah, definitely. I was a really big fan of Anne of Green Gables.
Mhm.
I loved Road to Avonlea. Like those were two kind of cornerstone shows, movies for me growing up. And after school, my sisters and I we liked to watch Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman.
Oh
So
my
that's another one.
gosh.
And in high school, I loved Dawson's Creek. And I was always a big fan of Maeve Binchy novels, actually. And I loved how she wrote about small towns or small communities in Ireland. Yeah, I think those would probably be the big ones.
I need to try her. I have a friend that lives over in France, and she's like, "You would love this author," and I'm like, "Would I?" So
It's so heartwarming. It really is. I wasn't sure. It's been years since I've read anything by her. I wasn't sure I'd still like it, but I picked up The Scarlet Feather and it's yeah, it's just really sweet and heartwarming. That's I would go there if that's what you're looking for.
so creatively, like, what are you enjoying about writing small town romances?
I like this notion of people taking care of each other, even when they're annoyed by people meddling in each other's business. Um, I I think it's maybe easier to get overlap in characters and settings. So if your reader falls in love with the place and wants to spend lots of time there and see past characters, I mean, I could be wrong. I haven't written anything other than small town, but I think it lends itself to that. And I also think because I live in a big city, it does feel like an escape to spend time in one of these idyllic places in my mind. And so like for my Harlequin series, Sunset County is really like an amalgamation of all of the various cottage countries in Ontario. So there's like Muskoka and there's Peterborough and there's this sort of like Midland area. So all these places have this charm to them, and so it was sort of a mashup there, and it was nice to like I said, escape a little bit and try to think of the imagery and try to think of just like the natural beauty of the places.
Yeah. Well, I remember my friends and I seeing the cover reveal for the Vets Shelter Surprise, your debut with Harlequin Special Edition. And we were freaking out. I was getting messages from people all over, like, have you seen? Have you seen this book? And I'm like, of course. Everybody was so excited. Tell us about your journey to becoming published with Harlequin. How did that happen?
Okay, so I also loved the cover so much. I was really nervous because I just thought for my first Harlequin, like I just want to love it so much. And when it came through and I clicked on it, I was like just super nervous. And then I was really, really pleased with it. And so yeah, shout out to the Harlequin art department. But I love it. And my journey to becoming published with Harlequin, it started, I want to say it was like 2016 or 2017. So I saw an ad on Facebook for a contest that was being run by Harlequin. And it was called Oh Canada. So I thought that was great, first of all. And they were looking for romance novels set in Canada. And so I decided that seemed like a great challenge. And but the problem was the contest deadline was closing in a couple of weeks, and so I think they wanted the first three chapters. So I took a mystery manuscript that I was working on. It was actually a story that started with a gruesome death, and I took out the murder and I like wove in a love interest. And after a week, I had what I thought was a pretty good start to the story. So I submitted the first three chapters, and a couple months later, I got an email at work that came through from Harlequin's London office, and they were expressing interest in seeing the rest of the book. So then I had to write it. So
Then you have
that
to
was,
write it.
yeah, I had to write it. So that happened. And then, it was okay, actually, and this is sort of funny. So the next day, I decided I was going to share with my grade 12 creative writing class that I was writing romance. And after class, one of my students approached me and told me that his grandfather, or maybe it was a great uncle, a family member, had started a romance publishing company back in the day. And he said, I think they're called, what is it? Harley Quine? Harlequin?
Stop. Are you
I know. I almost died. I was like, oh my gosh. And then I
so
realized,
casual and cool? Like,
I know. It's like like obviously he hadn't read any of these books. He knew it was part of family history. And so I just was like, I kept a straight face and I realized that he was talking about Richard Bonnycastle, who is one of the founders of Harlequin in Winnipeg, in Canada. And so I didn't share with him at the time that I was trying to get published with Harley Quine,
yeah.
but we were in touch actually earlier this year, and I told him the story, and he thought that was like hilarious. Um, so he's picked up a copy of my book,
Oh,
and
that's so cool.
yeah, so I thought that was kind of funny. So back to okay, so then I went through a couple of rounds of revise and resubmit. And so I guess one of the issues was the story wasn't really glamorous enough for romance, which I totally now see. And so one of the things I did is I changed my main character from a contractor to like a starchitect, and I amped up the aspirational setting. So we went back and forth a few times, and ultimately they passed on the project, but it did give me some confidence knowing that I could write something that had potential and that they were interested in seeing. So then I had this big goal, and I really set this. I was determined to become a Harlequin author, and specifically with special edition because I just realized that was a better fit. And so in my spare time, I did everything I could to chase that dream. So I was listening to your podcast, like anywhere I was driving or walking. I read every craft book I could get my hands on. I went to conferences. I joined the Toronto Romance Writers. So I spent my time, all my spare time, writing and reading. And then, so the way that the Vet Shelter Surprise got noticed was actually through a Twitter pitch. So this was the like hashtag romance includes you. And I will just say for any aspiring writer who's listening that every opportunity I've had has come from contests and pitches and going to conferences. So I would have never met Jane Porter from Thule had I not gone to Anaheim in 2023. So like take the opportunities to skip the biggest slush piles if you can and put yourself into these situations where you can meet people and form real and genuine connections, which is, one of my favorite parts of this job. But okay, so I did this Twitter pitch, and my tweet, which was like a 40 character word synopsis of the story, it got a like, which is basically like that was your invitation to send your manuscript to the editor. So about a year after that, I still hadn't heard back, and I just figured it wasn't a go. And so I was busy polishing up another project to submit to the Harlequin's Romance Includes You mentorship program. And it was like I was days away from submitting when an email came through, and that was an email offering a contract for the Vet Shelter Surprise. So that was
Oh
pretty
my
awesome.
gosh.
Yeah.
The timing,
I
Elle.
know, I know. And actually, the story that I wanted to submit for that mentorship, I now have a contract for. So that will still live with Harlequin. So I'm really, really excited for that. But yeah, it's been an incredible experience working with their team and going through each of the publication steps. And so I'm writing now three more for special edition, and just recently was have the opportunity to join the Montana Mavericks team. So
Oh my
I'll be working on that coming up
gosh.
too. Yeah, so it's really exciting.
So, how did you feel when the book was released? Like, I remember, so many of my friends that were just like, "Oh my gosh, finally, like Harlequin is doing this." And it was so gosh, it was so special. Like, I'm trying not to tear up, but just to like know that they were like, "Oh my god, like thank you. Finally, Harlequin." But for you as the author, how did you feel? Like, did you feel like what I'm doing is a big deal? Because it was a big deal.
It felt very special, I will say. And yeah, I just and I think part of the story that I was really happy about was that the main character, so Mel Carter and Georgia O'Neill, like they their sexuality really isn't a big deal, and it's not part of the story in the town. It's not something that's causing them any trouble, or and they're
They
not
just
facing.
are. They just
They just
they're
are,
just
yeah,
they
they
just
are.
yeah, it's just they just are. It is what it is.
And that was great. And actually, I got some inspiration from Schitt's Creek for that element of the story. I really liked
Yeah.
that. And so, and I like to say, like, they had enough drama to deal with. So,
No, I
yeah, it
love
did feel.
when, I think I love when we get stories where like being a woman of color, I love when can read a book and it's like I'm not reminded of like the hardships that being different, I guess, can cause for you. Like we just want to we just want to be in love too. So I really appreciated that.
Well, thank you for saying that. Yeah, I'm really happy with that part of the story. And so, yeah, it really did feel great. I had a little party with my friends and family to celebrate. And my dad, on the publication day, he sent me this picture of him at his local bookstore. So he was like buying the book and the cashier is in the background smiling.
Oh.
It was really cute, even though I'd already given him an advance copy for free, but he wanted to go and like buy the book in the store. So that was nice. And then I guess like the other really fun thing was I hadn't seen it on the shelf yet. And so I was in Calgary. And just before I went to the airport, I went to the local Indigo. And what was awesome was that the special editions were shelved. It was like three rows down from one of my favorite writers, Louise Penny, and who I actually name dropped in the vet shelter surprise. So that was like really cool to be like sharing a shelf with Louise Penny. So yeah, that it was really fun.
Well, you do have an upcoming title, a holiday romance, Wish Upon a Christmas Star, with the great Thule Publishing. I love Miss Jane P. So I was super excited when I was like, oh my gosh, this is with Thule. I know it comes out in like, is it October or November?
It's end of October, yes,
Okay.
and I just have to say like a quick about Jane, and I agree with you. She is amazing, and when I went to a conference, it was RWA in Anaheim last year. She was speaking, and I just saw on her Instagram she posted something about the session she was doing, and I wrote, underneath, looking forward to it or something like that. And not 5 minutes later, I got a DM in my inbox saying, like, I guess she could see on my Instagram that I was publishing my first Harlequin. And she said that she would like to take me out to coffee. And Megan Crane was there with her, who writes as Caitlin Cruz. And they just wanted to take me out to celebrate, which I thought was so
That's
nice.
so sweet.
It was so sweet. We had really great conversation, and I have so much respect for her. She really brings new writers along and is so giving of her time and resources, and she's just a really special person. And so I'm so excited to be publishing with Thule and with my editor Sinclair there. And so this book is Wish Upon a Christmas Star. It's a novella, and it's set in the late 70s. And the story is about this perfectionist lawyer who's on a mission to make her last family Christmas at her grandparents' mountain lodge, like one to remember. So she hires this free spirited guitar player and his band for their community Christmas Eve party. And the snowstorm traps the band overnight. So there's this like cascade of mishaps. And of course, our lawyer and musician fall in love. So this is going to be the kickoff to a 4-book series about their 4 daughters, their eventual 4 daughters, whose lives are all upended like in different ways once their parents share their intent to sell this family lodge that they've had for years and years. So that's that book. So I'm excited for that to be available. Yeah.
Was this, like, was this idea floating around in your head? Like, how did it come to you?
So when I met again with Jane and Sinclair at another conference, they just talked about how series work really well, and particularly ones with siblings. And I have 2 sisters, and I now have a sister-in-law, so I guess I have 3 sisters. And so this idea of having these 4 sisters who are very different, but who really love and support each other, and I just, yeah, this sort of like started to percolate, and they helped me flesh it out a little bit. So I'm really excited for this one, and for it to be set in the like majestic Rocky Mountains and these beautiful turquoise lakes, and the setting is quite amazing too.
Well, can you share like some behind the scenes details from writing it?
Sure. So I've been to the Rocky Mountains before, but I really wanted to get back out there to, just as someone who is going to be writing about them, to really be more observant and to experience it again. So in November, I did a solo trip out there. And so what I would do is every morning I'd get up at 4 because of the time change. And then it was also daylight savings. So that felt like a normal time to get up. And so from 4 to 8, I would write. And then in the afternoon, or in like later in the morning in the afternoon, I would tour around the area. And so I found this lodge called the Emerald Lake Lodge, which is in Yoho National Park, just over the Alberta border in BC. And it just was like exactly what I wanted for this family lodge. So I decided to go there, and I walked around, and it was just so dreamy, like all these wood burning fireplaces and cozy blankets, and this restaurant that overlooked like the actual stunning turquoise waters. And so I was like, okay, this is the inspiration for the lodge. And so I sent the cover designer a stock photo of the building, and she was actually able to use it in like what ended up being the final cover for the book. So I love it so much. It's so pretty.
Well, I have some writing questions. So, are you a plotter, a pantser, or would you say you're a mixture of both?
I am a plotter, and I learned that the hard way.
Okay, tell
Through
us.
trying to get, but I just thought, "Oh, it'll come to me and I'll figure it out as I go." And it just became a total disaster. And it was really, really frustrating to go back and untangle things that made no sense. And so I thought, okay, I can leave like a few details and a few scenes flexible and able to change, but I really do need that roadmap of like, here's what's happening, here's where we're going, and here are like at least a few things that are going to happen in between.
That is me. Okay. Like
Mhm.
I'm trying to, like, the idea of sitting and plotting drives me nuts, but being a pantser is not panning out. So I really, I love hearing that it was a disaster and you had to shift gears and you are a plotter now and it's working out. Because I mean, I know so many authors pants and it works out, but I just, yeah, it I feel like the best way I can describe it is, like, you end up to these doors that lead nowhere, and you're like, "I should have planned this out a little bit better."
Yes, and I would say too that like I think that it helps me. Sometimes it's hard to sit down and write. You don't feel like it, but I think that it helps me in those moments like dread it less because I know I have a plan and I know what I need to do, so I'm less likely to avoid working.
Well, you find yourself stuck, whether it's a scene, some dialogue, whatever. What do you do? Do you call somebody? Do you go for a walk? Talk about it with your wife? Like, what do you do?
Um, I usually have more than one thing on the go. So if that happens, I might shift to another project for a few hours
Okay.
or try to do something that feels productive in another way. So I might try thinking a little bit about like social media or newsletter, or I might just go for a walk. That sometimes helps clear the head.
And with you being a high school guidance counselor, What is your preferred time of day to write? Like, when are you writing?
So I write pretty much every day after school.
Okay.
We don't have kids, and so I do have time after work. And so I write, yeah, so after school and then on Sundays for a good chunk of the day. And then, of course, summer holidays and March break are very helpful too. So this summer, for example, I plan to get up every day at the time I would usually get up for work and just try to get as much work as done as possible before noon so that I can still have time for a summer vacation.
I'm gonna throw one in here that wasn't on the list, but what is something you know now that if you could go back to Elle a couple of years ago when all of this was getting started, and what would you go back and tell her that you know now that you didn't know then?
I think I was really, really terrified of like just getting like a mean email or like a bad review. And you know, I haven't gotten any mean emails, but
Mhm.
I've gotten a couple of like not so terrific reviews. And I think that I guess I was afraid, and maybe it impacted my writing a little bit. Like I was sort of like writing in a way that I was nervous about what other people would think about certain things or what have you. But I think I have realized now that if you feel good about what you're doing and you do have, those people that you trust or that a few like nice reviews about what you're doing, I think it actually stings less than I might have thought.
Well, you have kind of shared, like, stuff that we can expect that's coming out. Like, what are you working on right now? Like, can you tell us any details or no?
Yeah, so I have a couple things on the go. So I'm just finishing the first draft of my next special edition, which will be out next spring. And so in this story, the hero and the heroine are two characters that we first met in the vet shelter surprise. So it's Mel Carter's sister, Andy, and her friend since childhood, Knox Walker, who's the stable manager. So I'm hoping to have that draft done by the end of the month because this summer I'm going to write the second sisters book in the McCarthy series for Thule. And that one is another female story about a biology professor and a crime novelist. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And then I also want to get a good chunk of my Montana Mavericks book done. And in that one, my heroine also has a very fun job, which I think people are going to love this storyline. When I got the Bible and I saw what I got to write about, I was very, very, very excited. So it'll be great to be able to talk more about that in the future.
And lastly, where can everybody keep up with you online? Do you have newsletter? Plug all your stuff.
Yeah, so I have my website is ldouglas.com. So my newsletter sign up is there. Social media wise, I'm mostly on Instagram. It's at L Douglas Writer. I'm starting to dabble in TikTok just because, like, I don't know, I feel like I need to do my due diligence and just give it a go. And I think I have like 2 followers on Facebook, so I don't really spend any time there. But I'm going to try to spend some more time working on that. So yeah, mostly Instagram.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your time with us today. And you have to come back. Like, you have books coming out. Like, I have a podcast. You have to come back.
I would love that, Bree, and I would love to hear more about your writing. So anytime, and thank you again so much. This was such a pleasure.